Hello, all and sundry, and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Izzy. We're going to be talking everything predictions this weekend. We're going to be talking about Man United versus Tottenham. We are going to be talking about Manchester City against Newcastle, which I think is going to be the pick of all the games. And we're going to touch on my Gunners, Arsenal against Crystal Palace, that's going to be taking place on Monday. So, if you're new here and if you enjoy this content, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. I promise we're going to be having good content all the way through. So, we are going to start off on Friday night when Nottingham Forest are going to take on Sheffield United. Now, I have this game going 2-1 to Nottingham Forest. Reason being is because I was very impressed by Nottingham Forest's showing last weekend against Arsenal. While they didn't express too much going forward, they did show a decent amount of solidity in the back. Now, it was a 2-1 scoreline, and Arsenal should have probably won it by 3 or 4. And they did counterattack for their goal. But Nottingham Forest are on their second season in the Premier League, and you hope that they will learn that home fixtures, just like last season, are going to be their bread and butter, which is the reason why I have them going for the win against Sheffield United, because I do think that Sheffield United's first season back is going to be another tough one. They haven't made any significant signings of note to where you can sit back and think that, oh, well, they're going to easily survive. Usually for a lot of the teams at this point, they just want to get points on the board. And Nottingham Forest should be able to, with their home support, get at least a 2-1 victory, maybe a 1-0, something solid, something to give them something to believe in. And especially after the showing that they had against Arsenal, which I do not think was the worst. They didn't show much going forward, but they at least did show that counterattacking wise, they might be able to nick a couple of goals. So that's it for that first game. Next up, tomorrow we have Luton against Burnley. Now, this game has been postponed due to stadium renovations going on in Luton. Luton Stadium. It is good to see Luton in the Premier League. I am one of those novelists who love to see a team that you have never seen in the Premier League. Now, Luton got relegated just before the rebranding of the Premier League, as you will, because, before it was the first division. So sometimes we talk about the Premier League as if it is a totally new invention. Well, it was just pretty much a rebranding. However, teams such as Luton, teams such as Oldham, give me more of a nice nostalgic view, because I was very little when Luton were last in the league. And while I don't have any recollection of it, it is just nice to see a team that is bringing a fresh perspective to the league as far as how they want to play. They bring a fresh new storyline. And having watched the other day on Sky Sports, their storytelling of Luton and their climb through the divisions with a very inspiring story of different managers and what they meant to them as they go up. It is nice to see Luton Town back in the league. As far as Burnley, their first showing was not the worst. They lost 3-0 to Manchester City, which is a scoreline that you would expect from a team that is just coming up against the giant that Manchester City is. Vincent Kompany is trying to do different things with this team. He's trying to redefine how they play, trying to redefine how they are acknowledged in the league, and pretty much trying to play a possession-based game that you can say was modeled after his previous coach, and it's Pep Guardiola. However, he is going to be his own man. I do believe Vincent Kompany is one of the best captains that we've ever seen in the league, and hopefully that'll translate into the team. So why do I say this? Is because I still did come up with a prediction just in case the two teams would have met. And I do think that if the game was to go on tomorrow, I do think Burnley would have won it by 2-0. I say that because I do think that Vincent Kompany trying to impose that style of play in his team was very brave against Manchester City. I do think that he will eventually reap some benefits from it. I don't have him finishing as high as some pundits have him finishing as 11th or 12th. I do think that they will struggle because that level of competition down there might require him to be a little bit more pragmatic in some games where he might still choose to be idealistic. So I have them finishing slightly lower down the table. I don't have them being relegated, but I don't see them, pulling an Ipswich Town from 2001 or something of the sort. It's possible, but I don't think it's going to happen. So, since that game's not going on, let's go to Liverpool against Bournemouth. Now, Liverpool have a fantastic record against Bournemouth. Last season, you saw them dismantle them 9-0. I don't think that game is going to be as dramatic as this one is going to be. I still have Liverpool winning this game by a comfortable, say, 3-0. Maybe a 4 if Liverpool really do press on ahead. They still need to gel in midfield, especially since they do not have a number 6 of any particular note. They tried to play Alexis McAllister there last week, and while the early part of the game seemed good and promising for them, the latter half had Chelsea dominate for pretty much most of the second half. And that is my fear for Liverpool, is that they might be able to concede easy goals, especially in the start of the season, because they've missed out on both their targets. Not only did they miss out on Caicedo, who has now signed for Chelsea for £115 million, they also missed out on Romeo Lavia. Now, you could argue that Lavia is, still only 19. Would he be able to command that midfield? I think it's a lot better to have that body in there, especially since it's specialized to take care of that position, rather than have McAllister, who's pretty much a number 10, play in the position of a 6. Because a 6 is a very demanding role. You have to do a lot of defensive legwork. And on top of that, they might still hope that he creates a little bit more going forward. Now, Liverpool tend to play with wingbacks who do most of the creative work for them. So Robertson and Trent Alexander do most of the work for them, and Alexander is now inverting into midfield. So that might be able to help them out somewhat, but Trent Alexander-Arnold is not the best defender in the world as well. He is much more effective going forward, and I don't think that's anything that's new. It's not like I'm making a huge discovery. But maybe if he does invert enough tomorrow, he will give them much more of an edge against Bournemouth. Now, Bournemouth, on the other hand, didn't have the worst showing in their first game. I believe they tied 1-1 against West Ham. I did like the fact that they fought back in that game. I think that if they were able to score a lot more goals, with the likes of Solanke getting more confidence in his game, I do think that Bournemouth might have a chance at survival this season, but I don't think they're going to have much of a chance in this game. Now, I might be wrong. Crazier things have happened, but Bournemouth have a terrible and dire record at Anfield. I do not think they have scored in any of their last 3 or 4 visits there, and a lot of them have usually been 3 or 4-0 losses. So I am easily going to pick Liverpool for this win. It might end up coming harder than I might think it is, because I thought Manchester United would also have an easy game against Wolves, and Wolves did not show that in the least bit. We are still in the starting part of the season, so anything can happen. So on to the next game, where the Wolves that we were just talking about are taking on Brighton and Hove Albion. So Wolves had a fantastic showing on Monday against Man United in a game that was horribly officiated, and Wolves did not take any of their chances. They really should have won that game. Credit to Manchester United, because their quality showed. They were able to split their defense one time, and that was the one time that they needed to score. And that's what you're going to get punished by when you face very good teams. But I do know that Brighton have a very good record against Wolves, at least recently. Last season, they beat them 6-0 at home, and they beat them 3-2 away. I am going for Brighton to win this game 2-1. Why? Because I do think that De Zerbi will be much more adept at nullifying what Wolves were able to do to Manchester United, which is basically take care of that midfield gaping hole that United had all the way through, because Wolves were able to drive straight through the middle and cut Manchester United to pieces. Now, the problem that Wolves have faced last season and evidently from their first game is that they just don't take their chances. The Wolves are not a bad team. I love Pedro Neto, and I was extremely impressed by Cunha, who was impressive throughout the game, but they just did not take their chances. And Brighton is one of those teams that will take their chances. We saw last season how lethal they were. You have the likes of Welbeck, you have the likes of Pascal Gross, who are not as wasteful as Wolves were. And now I do think that Wolves' home support might help galvanize them somewhat, but I still do have Brighton winning this game because I think they are much stronger, much better tactically adept, although I was very impressed by Gary O'Neill's tactics against Manchester United, but I just don't see them winning this game. So I have Wolves to lose 1-2 at home to Brighton and have Hove Albion. Next up, we have Fulham and Brentford. This is one of those classic mid-table 50-50 games that I like to talk about. Fulham are going to have to count a lot on their Craven Cottage fan base to try and push them through this game. I don't think Brentford are going to be as lethal as they were last season because they don't have Ivan Toney in the team up until January. So I do see them needing to pull those goals around from the team, and they're well capable of doing that. I just do think that in this game, Fulham are going to probably edge the 50-50 on it. I do have them winning 2-1. That doesn't mean that I'm speaking with a degree of certainty, because Fulham are also going through a little bit of upheaval themselves. They are going to lose Alexander Mitrovic to Saudi Arabia probably, so he's likely not going to play in this game. I haven't heard them make too much noise in the transfer window. However, their acquisition of Raul Jimenez was a good acquisition. I don't think he has been as lethal as he had been in previous seasons, whether it's because of the head injury he got afterwards, and maybe his confidence is not there as much in trying to head balls. I do think that Fulham are going to struggle a little bit this season, but I don't think just yet. So I have them beating Brentford 2-1 in this game. On to the next game, which is going to be one of the three marquee games this season in my but in this weekend, is Tottenham against Manchester United. Now, Tottenham have a very good recent record against Man United. They have, however, lost Harry Kane. And make no bones about it, they are going to have to pull those goals from somewhere in and around the team. In the first game, they were able to do that through Emerson Royale and Romero, two defensive players, which kind of speaks volumes about how hard it is for them to play without Harry Kane. Taking him out of that team did not just take out goals. Taking out Harry Kane took assists, interplay, because Harry Kane was able to drop down into more of a number 10 or a number 8 position at times, and he was able to spray balls around. Him and Heung-min Son had a great tactical understanding of each other, and you are taking out the heart of Tottenham Hotspur. So they are going to have to find those goals from somewhere. I was pretty impressed with how they fought back against Brentford in the first game. That was a game that last season they struggled a whole lot, and they had Kane. Now they take on Manchester United, who were not impressive in the least bit against Wolves. Manchester United were cut to pieces many times in that game. And if it wasn't for the atrocious refereeing at the end, Man United would have tied that game. And if everything was to be fair, Manchester United should have lost that game. But think about it this way. This might be a chance for Erik ten Hag to rally his troops, make them realize that the season has started. We're not in preseason anymore, because they did feel like they were in preseason mode for most of that game. So what he could do now is make them run 10,000 kilometers and realize that the season has started. I do have this game finishing 2-2. I think that Tottenham are going to be able to pull those goals from around the team because it's not the death of Tottenham Hotspur that Harry Kane has left. Yes, it's a big gaping hole. Yes, they need a striker, but I do think that they are going to be able to pull, their resources and the players that they have to be able to have a good showing at home as well against Man United. They do have a decent record against Man United recently, like I said. I do think that Man United they should be better than they were on Monday. If not, I won't be surprised if Tottenham edge them out in this game. I just think that United cannot be that bad 2 games in a row. However, we said that last season, and they lost their first 2 games. But United will probably be a little more defensive, a little less defensive because Harry Kane is not there anymore. They are probably going to take more chances. Rashford, Sancho, and Bruno Fernandes should at one point click at least, and that should be good enough for 2 goals, or at the very least, at least 1. If the game ends up in a 1-1 draw, but I have it as 2-2. And then to the marquee game this week. Manchester City taking on Newcastle. So we all know Newcastle were phenomenal against an Aston Villa team that I have as my dark horses for a European spot this season, simply because of how well they've bought, the personnel that they have, and the manager that they have. So to see Eddie Howe do that to Aston Villa was impressive. However, in that fixture, at least over the last 3 or 4 years, it has been a bit of a baseball game or a basketball game, because Newcastle tend to win the home games, Aston Villa tend to win their home games. So it wasn't as surprising for me to see Newcastle win 5-1. It was more in the manner of how I saw them win 5-1. Tonali is a great addition to the team. He is going to be phenomenal for Newcastle, I think, this season. Even more so in the Champions League when they're going to be facing consistently good teams, because we don't know what the draw is going to look like. We do know that they're in pot 4, but I do think that Newcastle are going to be a very tough team to beat this season, especially at St. James's Park. You can hear all the time the din that comes from it translates all the way through the TV when you listen to Newcastle fans belt out the songs that they do throughout the whole game. And Newcastle are going to be valid challengers this season. Now, against Manchester City, however, Man City have not hit the highs that we expect them to hit. But that's normal City. City don't usually start the season very well all the time. The last time that they did make, one of those huge starts was when they became Centurions. After that, they seem to have a little bit of a stop-start type of momentum at the start of their season, and they always pick up somewhere around December, January, and by the time they get to March, April, and May, they are fully revving and they annihilate the teams that they tend to face. I do think they will struggle in this game, and if this game was anywhere other than the Etihad, I would have Newcastle possibly winning this game. I think the 3-3 draw that they had last season at St. James's Park was not a fluke. And I do think that City were very fortunate to beat them 2-0 at the Etihad. I think Newcastle might be good for a draw here. And I'm going out on a limb to say that because Newcastle do not have a good record at the Etihad. But I do think that this might be the season where they do get something from the Etihad. If they are to at least defensively hold their own, which last season they were miles and leaps and bounds ahead of most teams when it came to their defensive solidity, especially at the start of the season. I think Newcastle are good for a draw here. And figuring that Manchester City's form guide right now has them drawing 2 games, aside from the Burnley win. against Sevilla and against Arsenal that are good teams, Champions League level teams. I think Newcastle as a Champions League level team should be able to draw upon whatever they have right now and get the draw this game. Now, that's my hot take for this one. Historically, Manchester City tend to pummel Newcastle, but this is not the historical Newcastle of the last 10 to 15 years. This is a Newcastle that is beaming with pride, beaming with confidence, and they do have some real ball techers in that team. So that's the game for Newcastle against Man City. Next up, we have Aston Villa against Everton. Aston Villa, I have them beating Everton. Aston Villa, I have beating Everton 2-0 in this game. I have them winning simply because Everton are just not the team that they once were about 10 to 15 years ago against under David Moyes. They just don't play well. Not to mention that they always start the season slowly. Everton is one of those teams that always start the season slowly. I think Aston Villa will definitely bounce back from that 5-1 drubbing they got against Newcastle. I don't think that game was definitive of what the team is or what Unai Emery is. However, whenever you face a team of the quality that Newcastle have right now, a 5-1 loss, every once in a while, a drubbing is normal. It's probably just a little more jarring because of the transfer window they had, the end to the season that Aston Villa had. But I do have them bouncing back to win this game 2-0. I think that Tielemans is probably going to have more of an impact throughout this season. I do like Diaby a lot. Arsenal were looking at him, so I am a little more familiar with his abilities. Very pacey winger. He is likely going to be a standout performer this season. I do have them winning 2-0, and that's pretty much because Everton do not draw that much confidence from me. I am very afraid for Everton. I don't think they're going to get relegated because while they are a tough team to predict overall, I do think that they just have that name, that strong name that will probably keep them up one more season. They do need to at least stay up so that the Goodison Park story ends well, and when they do move into the new stadium, maybe that's when you might get a change of ownership or something that's going to make Everton go back to being the Everton team of the late 80s and the early 90s and maybe the mid 2000s when David Moyes had them very solid. And even though they had those terrible starts, they always seemed to make it through and finish either mid-table, and in some cases, like in 2006, I believe they finished just outside the top 4. So hopefully Everton can go back to being the Everton that we remember them for. Next up, we have West Ham against Chelsea. Now, this is another game that I have as a 2-2 draw. I'm sitting on the fence in this because Chelsea are still a work in progress. I think that West Ham, with the home form, with the home support, should be able to at least try and hold Chelsea to a draw. I possibly could see a West Ham win because Chelsea haven't gelled all that well. Maybe Caicedo starts this game or maybe comes off the bench. He will absolutely make them stronger. But I do think that this game is more likely to end in a draw because Chelsea still need to build that cohesion in the team. And West Ham are still holding on to Paquetá. They are rumored to sign Kudus. I think that they should be able to, at least at home, try to salvage a draw. So that's that for the West Ham-Chelsea game. And finally, on Monday, we are going to have Crystal Palace against Arsenal. Arsenal, much more recently, have struggled against Crystal Palace. And last season was the first season in a while that they beat Crystal Palace at Selhurst Park. I'm going to go for more of the same this season. I think Arsenal are going to win this game. I have them down to win 3-1. I say that because Arsenal are better than they were last season. I think they have more confidence going to Selhurst Park than they did in previous seasons when before, I believe, a Sam Allardyce win in 2017. I think Crystal Palace hadn't beaten Arsenal at home since 1979. Historically, Arsenal have a good record against Crystal Palace. I think that Martinelli and Saka are going to be the people to show out in this game, but I do think that Declan Rice's midfield presence alongside Thomas Partey will be key to this game. Key because Crystal Palace did receive a boost with Michael Olise extending his contract and staying, but Arsenal used to have a soft touch in the middle of the park, and I just don't see that this season. I think Thomas Partey, while he had a dip towards the end of last season, started last season extremely strongly. And Declan Rice, still buoyant from his move from West Ham, I think he's going to make that much of a difference, not only in this game, but in midfield for the rest of the season. He is pacey, he has strength, he has the ability to track back very fast, and I do think that the technical nous that Arteta is trying to instill into the team will come as second nature to Declan Rice. Up front, Crystal Palace are usually not that lethal. Hudson Edouard and Jordan Ayew are the people that they have been calling on recently. They don't have Wilfred Zaha to call on in this game, so I do see them struggling a bit. I don't know how much innovation Roy Hodgson is bringing in. I do think he's going to bring in stability rather than innovation. And if they don't attack as much, Arsenal will go forth and try and score as many goals as they can. So I think Arsenal is on the up and up. They are not going to struggle in this fixture as much as they have in the last few seasons. I think a lot of the noise that tended to come from Crystal Palace and Arsenal games is going to be quelled a little bit. This was the Granit Xhaka and fan debacle that happened a few years ago. This was the Sam Allardyce 3-0 victory over Arsene Wenger that just had fans absolutely bemoaning the lack of transfer activity and the direction that the club had taken. And I do remember this being a game that they, I think, lost to Crystal Palace as well under Unai Emery, that pretty much put them out of the running for the top four in Emery's first season, if memory serves me right. So I think that's all behind as far as Arsenal are concerned. I wouldn't be surprised if Crystal Palace were to maybe take something from this game. I don't see it because I think Arsenal is much stronger than they were last season. Last season's game was a little bit more of a knife edge when Martinelli and an own goal from Mark Guéhi gave Arsenal the win. But I do think that this will be a little bit more of a dominant performance from Arsenal. The problem Arsenal have is this lapse in concentration that they tend to have in the last 10 to 15 minutes of the last few games in preseason and against Nottingham Forest. But that's all I have for this predictor video today. I hope you like this. We are here. I am here. This is a new channel. So if you'd like to support me, please consider leaving a like at the bottom of this video right here. And please hit that subscribe button. Let this channel grow. And with more growth comes more videos, more content. Thank you so much for watching this. We will see you with our reactions to the games tomorrow. Peace.